Hi guys. I am here to talk about why I'm bugging you about submitting comments. What are these comments? What is this working group? What is TBDWG? And why in the world should we even bother? So, what is the TBDWG? It's the Tick-Borne Disease Working Group. It is a federal entity. It's a federal working group. It was created in the Cures Act. This is its 5th year and its final year unless it's extended. And I will read to you what they say they do. Blah, blah, blah. Created as part of the 21st Century Cures Act to provide subject matter expertise and to review federal efforts related to all tick-borne diseases to help ensure interagency coordination and minimize overlap and to examine research priorities. Okay, that was a bunch of words. To provide subject matter expertise. Okay, tell us what's actually true and not true about the subject. You guys go get the experts and tell us what they say. Review federal efforts related to tick-borne diseases. Look at what the HHS, CDC, NIH, military, all these people are doing related to tick-borne diseases. Help ensure interagency coordination and minimize overlap. Make sure all these agencies aren't doing the same thing and spending a bunch of money doing the same thing over and over again. Part of their mission also is to examine all the research that's out there, all the information, and summarize what it says. That's one of our problems. So that's what this working group is. So it's a federal working group. The feds created it. Now, when they created this one, they screwed us from the start. So I've been told that other federal working groups, like for other illnesses or other deeds and stuff, they weren't created like this one. So this one was created to have 7 federal members and 7 non-federal members. So when they vote on things, that's 7-7. But the 7 federal members, which already no other working group is like that, I'm told. There's more non-federal members than federal members, which is as it should be. Because the federal members have an agenda. And so, okay, lost that train of thought, you know how that goes. So the federal members, they get to choose the non-federal members. So these 7 federal members, they get to choose who the 7 non-federal members are. And you know, some of these guys, this isn't their main thing. This isn't their main job. So who's picking the list? Who's making this list up of, we want these guys to be our non-federal members? It's the CDC and NIH. So they give this list of who they want to be the other guys on the working group to the HHS secretary and assistant secretary. 2 people. And those 2 people decide who the 7 are. So we don't know if they give them a list of 8, they give them a list of 7. These are the 7 we want. Oh, guess you got to pick them. So every single time. So the working group works for 2 years, writes a report. 2 years, writes a report. 2 years, writes a report. Is it only last 5 years? So it's a little different than that, but because there's been 2 other reports and this is the last one. And that happens at the end of this year. So we don't have much time. And so every single time they've put in what I call an anti-long Lyme troll. So it's one of those guys who's been involved since 1993. The same guys. I don't know how that's possible. How old are these people? The same guys are involved that have always been involved. And then they have some new guys that support their agenda and what they've done and to keep everything covered up from 1993. That's a whole another video, what happened in 1993. So these same guys have been manipulating how Lyme goes, how Lyme medicine works, how it doesn't work for 40 years. And so the federal members get the HHS secretary to put the 7 members on and always include one of the trolls. So the first troll was Wormser, and if you know anything about our history, you know that name. The second one was Shapiro. I think you probably know that name unless you're brand new, which is okay. It's hard to learn anything when you're like trying to stay alive. And the new one is Sud. I can't pronounce this first name, so I'm not going to try. So his last name is Sood, S-O-O-D. And so they are always going to vote with the feds, the CDC and NIH. There's no question. So the vote then is 8-6. And now the HHS people, those two people, they changed, but they put Sood on. But the last two HHS people that put Shapiro on, 38,000 of us. Can you imagine 38,000 of us actually doing something together? 38,000 of us signed petition to have Shapiro not be put on the working group, and they did it anyway. And we didn't have warning on the other two. I mean, I wasn't coherent during the Wormser time. That was when I was at my sickest, but we didn't have any warning about Sood, and we didn't quite know who he was, or I didn't quite know who he was until he was already in place. But they know they're doing this, and they was putting the troll in. They certainly know when 38,000 of us are screaming and yelling saying don't do it, and they did it anyway. So their scheme is to always put in this troll so that the vote is always 8-6 in their favor, at least. So this year they have Sood, and they also have a guy that's an ALDF advisor, something that sounds like an advisor. It seems like a nice guy. They all seem like nice people. Well, not the trolls, but the guys, people on the working group. They seem like it. But even the feds that are on the working group have said multiple times, I am here to represent my agency. I feel bad for you, but I have to represent my agency. That is their job. And so that's kind of how the working group works. So now what are public comments? So public comments, whenever a federal entity does something, probably not whenever, but a lot of these times when they do something, they have to get the public viewpoint. And they get the public viewpoint by requesting comments. And these are called public comments. And you might have seen that we can give oral comments, and you sign up early, and they tell you if you get to go or not. And they only let 9 people, and I don't think none of us are even trying to do it because I've gotten to do it a couple times. And so I'm doing it again. So it'd be awesome to say next on October 4th and 5th when I'm doing my oral comment that hundreds of us sent in these comments, and they better not ignore them this time, and we kicked ass. So I lost my train of thought thinking I just said a bad word. Public comments. So when an agency does something, they request public comments, and they have to send out this notice and say, hey, we're requesting public comments, and tell you when they're due and all that stuff. And so that's what a public comment is. And what you want to put in the public comment is something about the effort. So we know what their mandate is, and a few of us that have been watching what they've been doing know a lot of things are bullshit, and we know what's bullshit in the whole Lyme medicine arena, and that's the stuff we want to point out. So this year, why is this public comment thing such a big deal, and she keeps going on about it? Well, this is the last year. So this is year 5. Unless the working group is extended, the working group ends. And what the report to Congress says is all Congress and the public in the United States, but a lot of other countries base their Lyme medicine on the United States. So all anyone's ever going to be told is what is in that report to Congress. So our comments are part of this report to Congress. And we want to call things out so that someone knows that this has been a bunch of bullshit for 40 years and during this whole working group. So that's what we do. And then also, it's really important to do that this year because how they're analyzing comments is very different. It doesn't seem so much like a bunch of crap. So in the past, we'd write in comments and they would just whitewash them, summarize. Like you'd say, we're calling for an investigation into the corruption of Lyme medicine. They would write down the comment, patients have some trust issues with the federal agencies. Not why. Just whitewash it like that. Just, no more. Just cover it up. And so that's what they've been doing in the past. This time it seems like the person that's over the comments really wants us to send them in and to adequately and truthfully represent what we're saying. And they're using a software, and my brain's toast. And I can't say I listened to it very hard, but my impression of this software and this analysis is like big data software. And so what big data analysis will do is all of this crud's thrown in there. So all these comments are thrown in there. And it searches for themes. And so a bunch of us are saying this one kind of thing. Then if it's worded the same in the different comments and it can pull it out, it'll say, here's a theme that 20 people said this. And we want it to say 1,000 people said this, or 100 people at least. But the other day, I guess the other month, the comment person, the person that's over the comments for the working group, said something like 100 people have ever submitted comments to the working group. I can't believe that. I mean, maybe it wasn't 100, but it was some crazy number that I was just astonished at. Because 5 or 10 of those are mine. Like, I know everyone's sick, but I would think more than 10 or 20 of us know this is going on, but maybe not, because we are all so sick. And this stuff, it's out of everyone's wheelhouse. They don't know how to find this stuff is going on and what it all means, and to sit through an 8-hour meeting. Are you crazy? I can't listen for 20 minutes. And it takes a lot to figure out, listen, and then listen for a while, and then figure out what weasel things are going on and how all this is going down. Because I think I'm the only one talking about how all this is going down. This whole vote thing being 8-6, and no matter what happens, the feds control the vote, and that controls the report to Congress, and so they're totally in control of what this is going to say. So this whole big data thing is why this is a big deal. That, and it being the last year, and the person doing the comments and the advocates that are on the working group, they want us to send these in, and they want us, the truth, to be represented. At least a good portion of our advocates want that. And I was going to say something else important. Oh, another thing about this year. So you might have noticed things are changing a little bit with Lyme disease. Like, all of a sudden, the CDC admits almost 500,000 cases of Lyme occur every year. New cases. 500,000. It was like 30,000, and now it's 500,000. That's not global warming. That's some fessing up going on. And why are they doing that? Oh, because there's a Lyme vaccine coming out. They're in the trials. And so how do you push a vaccine for an illness that's no big deal? I'm sure they're going to weasel around the way, but that's where they're at this year. It's kind of a weird thing. Like, admit some stuff, but don't admit other stuff. Don't admit that we didn't admit it before. And so they're in this weird spot. So some things are going through that never been going through before. So we're in this special place right now, and we got to hurry. Because, well, I don't do anything till the last minute because I can't get it up to go do it. So we got to get these in pretty quick. You'll see that the deadline for comments was Monday. But what happens is, right before, you can send the comments in all year long, any day of the week, the month, of the year. It's just, if you want that person in charge of comments to get that comment before that working group meeting, then you have to get in by the date. And so, always in the past, like, they're wrapping up the report now. They're supposed to come back together and vote on what actual content is going to be in the report. Always in the past, they still kept bringing comments in. So they could, cut us off, but I don't think they would do that to us. So that's what that whole deadline. But we do need to get them in the next week or two. And so, okay, that's comments. That's what's different about this year. So with that whole big data software, what I've done is I've written some comments that are geared at how would an analysis go if they received this comment. Not just my comment, but 100 of us submitting these comments. So I've made these standalone comments. So this is my giant paragraph that says, this is bad, this is what's being done, this is what needs to be fixed, this is bullshit, this actually exists and you say it doesn't exist, the feds say it doesn't exist, this is what we want the non-federal advocates to do on the working group, don't let them make you do this, we need to do this, that kind of stuff. Like, when you first hear about this stuff, you say, I'm going to send my story in, because how could anyone who's a halfway decent human being not listen to this and think, oh, that's so horrible. That person has to go through it. Oh, more people have to go through that. My loved one could be going through that. We got to stop this. But that's not what happens. And I guess like the CDC guy himself said, I feel bad for you. He said long Lyme disease is a medical travesty, but the CDC agenda is only to be worried about or do things about or anything about acute Lyme. Pretty much, I feel bad for you, but you're screwed. Sorry. And he said that in 2020 in the working group. So more stories aren't what we need to do. I think any of us, it's their right to get their story documented. Get your story in a public comment. And that's my story. That's what happened to me. It sucked. And it was wrong. And I just want it documented. Everybody has that right. But what I've written up is something geared at that big data stuff so that it'll be very obvious, this is our comment. If you whitewash it, you're an absolute asshole, because it's very clear what this says and what I'm talking about. And then the big data will pull that theme out when it sees, okay, that's definitely a theme, and now that person has that theme, and that person has that theme, and that person has that theme. 100 people have this theme. Here is a giant theme that 100 people sent in. So that's what these are written like. So I've got 3 different sets of these comments. And that is because they only allow us 4 pages. There is so much going on and so much wrong and so much that has gone on that 4 pages isn't enough. So I've got 3 sets of them. And they're not my story. They're not just what's happening to me. They're what's wrong, what we need fixed, what exists that they're saying doesn't exist, all this stuff for all of us. So it's not my document, it's everyone's document. And that's how I wrote them. And so getting them in is the challenging thing, because everybody's so sick and technology passed us by, and it's like, I don't know what they are, but 2, how do I get them? Where are they? Then what do I have to do to send them in and then be according to the rules? So that's the challenge. So I have them on Google Docs today, and I had them in Dropbox, but that's being challenging for people. So Dropbox is just both of them. Google Docs and Dropbox is just this place. So think of it as like a mailbox, or just a box. Forget the word mail. That's going to be confusing. It's just a box, and it's sitting out there on the internet, and you can get to it, but other people can't get to it unless you send them a link to it. And then once they have a link to it, they can get to it. And they can't get in and mess it up, because we could easily get it all messed up by accident. Like, boom, I can do that on my own. But they can pull it out, and then they can send it in. And then the rules with sending them in is 4-page. 4-page max, that's all we can do. So we have to do this 3 different times. And then you think, if you're the person, this very nice person that gets these emails, that they just work there and they're getting the emails, and then all of a sudden they're going to get 3 from each person, or if I'm starting sending them on behalf of people. So let me know if I can send one on for you. I'll put your name in it. I'll get to that in a minute. It'll be your thing, but it'll be from my email address. So they're getting, all these emails, 3 different emails from one person, and they're used to not getting any comments, and all of a sudden they're getting 3 comments. So we have to distinguish the emails, but they make us put a subject line in that doesn't let us distinguish this is a second email. So we do that in the body of the text. So email goes to tick-borne disease at hhs.gov. It has to have a subject line of written public comments - October 4th to 5th meeting, like that. I send the instructions out with it. And then in the body of the text, I say, this is one of 3 documents I'm submitting because you guys have a page limit of 4 pages. And then I go, this is the second one. And then I go, this is the third one. And then if I'm sending it on behalf of someone, I make clearly right at the beginning, I am sending this on behalf of this person's name, or anonymous. You can be anonymous because they're going to publish your name with your comment. And it's not like it's not showing up on MTV or something. I guess that's really old, but show my age. It's not showing up on Entertainment Tonight, I guess. So it's out in the world that that's your comment, but there's a limited number of people that would ever see that comment. And then it has to have your city and state so that I can't go out there and create 100 emails and send the documents in 100 times and it not be real people. So they at least want a city and state, but you can be anonymous. And so that's everything. But I thought I'd go about, so I didn't forget things this time. I thought I'd look at some of these comments with you. So I discussed the whole what's wrong with the federal working group. So one of these comments, okay, that's a good one. One of these comments is, hey, this working group's been manipulated from the start. And you can't tell me that it hasn't, because no other working group works like this, where there's many feds as there are non-federal members, and then the feds pick the non-federal members, and then the feds pick a troll and put them in so that the feds always have the vote. So it's been manipulated from the start, and we need a new working group. We need it extended, but we also need a new working group where the non-federal members have control, because this is BS that the feds have controlled this thing for 5 years. So that's one of the comments. Oh, another comment. So the feds like to say in these working groups, they like to use weasel words, and they like to say things that aren't true. So one of the things they say that isn't true is the science doesn't say this, or the science doesn't say that. So the science doesn't say that Lyme persists. So if you've seen the petition by Carl Tuttle, awesome guy, works so hard for us. He has hundreds of articles, like I'm guessing 400, 300 to 500 articles. So over 100 of those articles, I think 128 or something, are about persistent Lyme. So they're saying the science is still out, or the science doesn't exist. And here it is, a guy who has Lyme disease, who is enduring, fighting to stay alive, fighting to do all that he does for us. And he's found hundreds of articles that they say doesn't even exist, and they're peer-reviewed studies, they're scientific articles, and they're saying they don't exist. Like, one, that's obvious BS, and two, why are they doing that? That just shows this whole, it's not ignorance. Lyme disease has not been so stupid for 40 years because of ignorance. Like, right there. Hundreds of articles exist and they say they don't. So it's not ignorance, and it's not bureaucratic crud. Like, oops, like, it's the hierarchy. Somebody dropped the ball here, and here, and it's a systemic, and that's why this failed to happen. And no, there's hundreds of articles that exist and they say they don't. So One of these comments calls that out and documents how many of these studies Carl Tuttle has gathered, documented, and sent to the feds himself, personally to the feds. Like, he's always adding to the petition, and he'll add a letter that he's written to one of the feds or somebody in the Lyme arena, and he'll add that to the petition. It's the petition for a congressional investigation into the manipulation of Lyme disease. That was long. And so he writes letters to them, but he has also submitted all of them. Like, here they are, here's all these studies to the feds, and especially to the head of Lyme for the HHS. Gotten it in an email. So they're saying that doesn't exist, and when one of their mandates is to collect what are all the studies in the world about Lyme, and what do they say? That's one of their mandates, and they're saying, oh, we don't have any studies. Like, bullshit. So that's one of the comments. Oh, one of my big comments, that's like page and a half, is the federal, okay, so most of these we're asking the non-federal members to do these things because the federal members won't. The federal members will pretend like we never even said this. So these are like, please, non-federal members, please do this, document this, require this. And I'll get to a minority report in a minute. So we're asking them to do these things. So we want them to document that this needs to happen, right? Because that's what the members are doing. They're saying we recommend this happens. They can't say the CDC has to do this, because nobody can tell the CDC what to do. There's a whole story about that. So nobody can tell the CDC what to do. So they're recommending this has to be done. This needs to be done. This must be done for this to happen, for all these people to quit having their lives and health destroyed and becoming disabled, even though they won't even acknowledge we're disabled, which is another comment. So this one is for the non-feds to document that a federal health agency public service announcement must go out, and I have a page and a half of the things that have to go out in a public service announcement. Like, the world needs to know these things. We know that. So, like, Lyme disease is a serious and disabling illness that results in long-term chronic multi-system illness. Lyme disease occurs in every United States state and in many other countries where the governments, like the United States government, has said it does not occur. Lyme disease results in over 300 illnesses, neurological, immune, and neuroimmune illness, and cognitive and mental health issues. That anyone with all these different illnesses, including long COVID, which is something we can really tap into right now. There's all these sick people that could have diagnosed Lyme, and that's what's COVID was their last straw, and now they're sick. We're calling it long COVID when it's long Lyme. So, and all the other ones like ME, CFS, fibro, chronic pain, Alzheimer's, cognitive and mental health issues, dementia, lupus, MS, all this stuff. Those people need to be told that, hey, you could have a problem with Lyme and you need to get to a Lyme doctor, and you need to get a non-CDC Lyme test, and health insurers, you got to pay for it. And there's like separate in here and other comments about the whole they don't pay for it BS. So another one is Lyme disease is not a psychosomatic illness. It is a very real and caused by, I have an extra A. It is very real and caused by infections. If you haven't sent in your comments yet, you won't have that typo. I went through this 3 times and my brain was like, oh, it broke it. Another part of, so I put some stuff in the public service announcement that's kind of like, they'd have to do something and then they'd have to announce that they did it. And that's one of these. That a special ruling for long-term disability is being written, and real Lyme disease advocates are participating in that, in the majority in that. So that goes with one of the comments. So there is no ruling for Lyme disease is one of the illnesses that can disable you. And that causes us not to be able to get federal disability and not to get private disability. So a lot of people think federal disability is just the problem. But if you paid in so that you had private disability insurance, so that if anything ever happened to you and you could no longer work, and they would have to, pay you 60% of your salary for the rest of your life or your working life, then they can deny you. Oh, long Lyme doesn't exist. Oh, you tested negative on a CDC test. You don't have Lyme. Oh, it's psychosomatic, so you're not really sick. When somatic means you have real symptoms, and so you are sick. But they pull that one when they deny you, because people get scared off and they don't pursue it, so they get to just do that. Because if you didn't know, the law ERISA makes it so that private disability insurers, never have to pay more than they would have had to pay if they honored your valid claim. So they can deny everybody all day long, and nothing's going to happen to them. If you sue them, they will only ever have to pay what they would have had to pay you if they hadn't denied you. There's no penalties. And so even if you sue them, they're going to try to scare you and say, well, you're going to have to pay our lawyers if you lose, and you're going to lose. And so they get to deny you like that. So that's one of the comments. Oh, another one is about Lyme disease education. So in March, I think it was March, so we'll just say in 2020, the working group guy that works for the CDC, so the CDC representative, one of the federal members, he said that they can't educate doctors, they can't educate doctors about long Lyme because it would confuse them. So the CDC, NIH, and HHS have spent 40 years telling doctors that Lyme is rare, that Lyme only occurs out in the Northeast, only test people if they have a bullseye rash and they're in the Northeast. And then if they do test, they have to use the CDC test. And then they've told them Lyme isn't serious, Lyme isn't disabling, just give them a couple weeks of doxy, they'll be fine. And all those people who think that they're actually sick with long Lyme, they got mental issues. There's nothing wrong with them. And so they've told doctors that for 40 years. And now they're saying they can't tell them the truth because it will confuse them. And that CDC rep is the same guy representing that same agenda this year as they did before. And he's working beside these advocates that didn't sit there and listen to him say that in 2020 and didn't pick it through, say, that's what that guy just said. You gotta be shitting me. We can't tell them the truth because we lied to them for 40 years, and that would confuse them if we told them the truth now. So that's one of the comments. And that's why we have to call this stuff out. Because if we embarrass them, then maybe they won't want to do that anymore. Like, people don't like it when you embarrass them in their job. Even if they're ordered to do it. Everybody can leave a job that they're being ordered to do stuff. Especially when you've been at it for 40 years, the same guy's doing the same job for decades. Quit already. So, here's another one. And so a lot of these in this public service announcement are also have their own standalone comment. Oh, can I show you my comment? That's a really big one. Let's find a short one so you can see it. Here's a short one. So, say this is a comment. If I actually circled it with my finger. And then this is bold. So that's the theme. That's the subject. That's, hey, this is this comment. This is what we're saying. We want this. And then this talks about why that's a thing. So, I could not be a weather person. No. So, I was going to go over something cool. It's really hard to talk to yourself like this, by the way. Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's in this public service announcement list, but it's also has its own, probably like 3 comments. So some of the comments are about, okay, all these guys that manipulated Lyme or supported that manipulation, and they know they're doing it unless they're like, don't know any medical science stuff at all, and they shouldn't be in that role. So common sense would be the feds are full of crap, and the IDSA and ALDF. So some of these comments are those guys supporting for 40 years, the guys that did it, do it, or supported it for 40 years, this whole corruption of Lyme medicine, those guys are out. They no longer work for the feds. They no longer work in any of these efforts that have any federal ties, because we can't tell nonprofits what to do. So anything that has a federal tie, these guys are not part of that anymore. And then no more federal research funds for these guys that keep publishing these crap studies that are not good science. They're a bunch of crap just to put out a publication that says a bunch of conclusions that aren't true, so they can support this false Lyme agenda that they've been putting out to the public for 40 years and the medical community. All those guys are out. No more. So I go into that quite a bit. 2 or 3 different comments, one really long one, because it's kind of like 2 different things. People that work for the feds, that work with the feds, and then the ones that are getting all our money. Like, I think it was Wormser. He just got like $1 million grant and stuff. Wormser, like one of the bad guys. I don't know if it was Wormser, but I think it was Wormser. So, let's see if there's any more. So I do have one about the investigation. So that scared some people, but I mean, okay, one reason to put that in there is because Carl Tuttle's petition for calling for an investigation, a congressional investigation into the manipulation, corruption, not sure what it says, of Lyme disease by the CDC, IDSA, and ALDF. I don't know if he names them all, but that's who's involved. Must be investigated. So that petition, almost 100,000 of us have signed it. 100,000. That is huge. I mean, we can't form sentences a lot of the time. And that's gotten 100,000 signatures. So this says that, and it talks about it a little bit. And in case you don't know what all that is about, so there were publications in the 80s and the 90s. And Alan Steer's name was on some of those. It's a big name. And they said the truth about Lyme. They said that testing wasn't going to work. Lyme, well, it didn't say testing was going to work. It said that Lyme was 0 negative. So people, if they took this CDC Lyme test that they eventually approved and they knew this was going to happen, that those people would show up as being negative, because it makes your immune system quit producing the antibodies, and it's an antibody test. That's probably not technically perfectly correct, but that's how I say it and think of it. So if your body quits making antibodies and it's an antibody test, you're not going to test positive. So that's 0 negativity. The publications also said that, hey, Lyme is a serious disabling disease. And it also said Lyme disease causes neurological, immune, and neuroimmune effects. And so everything was fine, 1980s and 90s, and the early 90s that happened. 1993 comes around. There's several different groups trying to produce a Lyme vaccine. And for a Lyme vaccine to go to trial, you have to have a test, and there was no test for Lyme disease. So they had to get a test. 2, if that test does not work, it looks like your vaccine does work. And that was the goal. So you wanted a test to go to trial. 2, test doesn't work. Awesome. Looks like our vaccine does. Because give a bunch of people the vaccine, and then they're tested, and it says they don't have Lyme. Oh, your vaccine must work. But no, that test didn't work. So that's what they did. And so 1993 comes along, and they want that to happen. So what they do is they just reverse Lyme medicine. So suddenly, like, Alan Steer comes out and he says, oh, Lyme disease, fibromyalgia, if that's how you say that, chronic fatigue syndrome, those are not serious illnesses. Like, no big deal at all. Like Lyme disease, no big deal. Those are just hysterical women's non-illnesses. Yeah, that hurt, didn't it? Hysterical women's non-illnesses. He didn't use those words exactly, but pretty much that's what he said. So he took out all three, Lyme, fibro, and chronic fatigue. When he had just published that well, Lyme was the one I was reading. Lyme has neurological, immune, and neuroimmune consequences. Now suddenly it's a hysterical women's non-illness. So anyone involved with all that crap that they had to keep covered up for 40 years, and that's why this false controversy has been going on. This talks a lot about this false controversy, because another thing that the CDC representative on the working group said in 2020, let me think, is a good one. One is the CDC test works because it tells us what we expect it to. That's some science there, buddy. So the CDC test works because it tells us what we expect. And what do we expect? We expect it not to work. And that's because we've been telling doctors not to test for 40 years, and if they do, use this test that we know doesn't work. So the CDC test, the CDC itself says it only works in weeks 4 to 6. It's an acute case only test, weeks 4 to 6. And on top of that, it's also 71% false negative. So week 4 to 6 only, and 71% false negative. So 7.1 people out of every 10 are told they do not have Lyme when they do. And he says the test works because it tells us what we expect. When what they expect is based on false statistics and all this crap from 40 years of them telling doctors not to test and then use this crappy test. Another thing he said is, when he said, yeah, long Lyme is a medical travesty, he feels bad for us. But it's the CDC's agenda to only care about acute Lyme. He said, acute Lyme matters more than long Lyme. The cases matter more. There's more of them, and it's less controversial. So he says there's more acute cases, they matter more, and it's less controversial. So, more cases. 40 years, 71% false negatives, and you're saying now there's 500,000 a year? Do some math there, buddy. There is no way there's more acute cases than there are 40 years of you telling people they don't have it. 7.1 of every 10. And that's just the people that actually get to a doctor that says, oh, you should have a Lyme test. Instead of, oh, Lyme doesn't cause that, when it does cause that, whatever it is that is that. So, not more cases than long Lyme. There's not more acute cases than long-term cases. They matter more. So how in the world do they matter more when you can stop it, and that's important. Actually treat it in the beginning, stop them from being one of the long-term cases. But how do they matter more when the federal government, IDSA and LDF, caused millions of people become long-term cases, chronically ill, in pain, excruciating pain, absolutely miserable that no words can convey, lose everything because they have to pay for all this, they can't work anymore, lose their finances, lose their relationships because the government says you're not sick. The doctors say you're not sick. You faker, get up. So they cause all that to happen to millions of people, and they don't matter as much as people that aren't even sick yet and that you could actually help. With no big deal help. Just actually get them treated well and tell them the truth and things to watch out for. So they matter more. And then the third thing, less controversial. When they created the controversy they created it. It didn't exist. It's false. Like all these things, persistent Lyme, we haven't proven persistent Lyme, or Lyme is proven, our experts say Lyme is proven not to persist. Like the NIH said that, this working group. So ignoring the whole Carl Tuttle hundreds of studies. So they created the controversy, but they like to say it's controversial. We can't do that as controversial. So that whole false controversy does wonders for them. They can't do that as too controversial. So they can't update the website about long Lyme, or they can't tell doctors because it'll confuse them and it's controversial. All this crap about a controversy they created. They created all this to back up that whole reversing Lyme medicine and making testing fail so the vaccine could go to trial and appear to work. So that's a lot of politics, and that's a lot of get dumped on at one time. But you can just, I hate to say take my word for it because, like, who am I? But, okay, people a lot smarter than me say this is what happened. And I've looked at the stuff, and it sure looks like that's what happened. So, and even if you don't like that, you could take those comments out if you don't like them. But it won't hurt anything to investigate it, right? Won't hurt anything. Well, won't hurt us for them to investigate it. So I think leave them in there. Let's see if there's any more. Those are the big ones, and you got to be getting tired of listening to me. There's the Carl Tuttle documents. Yeah, that's getting rid of the corrupt people. Okay, that's the thing about the corrupt people. So as long as these people are still working in the Lyme arena, things will always be jacked up. So, okay, that was a big subject I want to talk about. So you might not have known it, but for the last several years, there's been two big efforts for Lyme disease community, the Lyme disease community. And they're supposed to be a big deal, and they're supposed to be making a huge difference for us. One is this working group that's been manipulated from the very start to not admit all the stuff that we need to admit to move on. Like one of the big things that the feds always say, I lost it, I knew I was going to lose that thought. One of the big things that the feds always say, oh, we can't invest in research, we can't fund treatment for Lyme disease until we solve the persistence question. They won't look at the studies that solve that persistence question. And I don't think you have to solve the persistent question anyway to decide to find things that would help these people. I think you can help them without solving that question, but that question's been solved in the 80s and 90s, and they reverse the science and pretend like these studies don't exist, and they won't fund any new ones. They just fund the little, hey buddy, those guys. That's the only guys they fund. They don't fund real stuff. Oh, I'm gonna write that down. There's another subject I gotta talk about. Okay, I got like 3 more. Sorry, guys. Now I'm gonna lose the one I'm thinking about. Yeah, I lost what I was gonna say. It's gone. Oh yeah, okay, I found it. That's remarkable. So one of the things they bring up a lot is keeps trying to get out of my brain. Okay, there were 2 big things going on, right? So the working group is one of them, and I put a little interjection in there that made me lose my train of thought. And another thing is Lyme X. So if you've heard of Lyme X, they're involved with some testing thing, right? Well, when I first heard of Lyme X, maybe it was me, and I was too sick, it sounded like a nonprofit. It's like, okay, these rich people gave Lyme like $20 million or something, and they're going to fund research, and it was like, yeah, awesome. But now all of a sudden, HHS is involved. They weaseled their way in. Come to find out, no, HHS was always involved. And then I was tweeting about the Lyme X put out a paper, and it was supposed to be a big deal. This paper finally coming out. And the paper finally came out, and you know what it said? Instead of saying Lyme is disabling, we need a special ruling, and these people are disabled, it said that Lyme is merely disruptive, however you would, whatever word you put in front of disruptive without capacity. It results in a person being, they use the word disruptive, I'm going to go with disrupted without capacity. So is it all over the place? So instead of, saying these people are disabled, point blank, they are disabled. We need a special ruling so they can get disability and they can quit getting jacked around by the private disability insurers, and then people will actually recognize that this is a disabling illness and these people don't need you to gaslight them or treat them like crap and not believe them. They said that it's disruptive without capacity. So to be disrupted, that's a temporary thing. And I also heard the HHS LymeX person say that LymeX was, she's not going to like this. LymeX was, she's a nice person, but LymeX was created to, I can't think of the right word, to get all of the funds, to control all of the funds from the feds and the private funds. They want all the research funds going through them, and them is HHS. So, oh yeah, I was tweeting about that whole disruptive without capacity thing instead of disabled, and it got back around to the head for Lyme for HHS, who this LymeX is their baby, and so they're like, well, why don't you come meet with our LymeX people and talk about this? Tell them your concerns. Tell them your concerns. And that shut me up for a little bit until I had that meeting. I didn't want to be talking out of my butt and not saying the right thing. So it did shut me up a little bit. And then after that meeting with them, I figured out there were two people, and those two people were subcontractors of contractors of HHS. So LymeX is HHS. Who pays the bills? Maybe I'm wrong, and I looked through a lot of the studies and stuff, and you finally look at all the words and stuff, and it's HHS. But they want it to be so that they can say it's arm's length. It's an arm's length thing. So if they publish something that the feds are going to want to say, no, we don't agree with that. Those people said that, but they're arm's length. They said your test sucked. Well, they're arm's length. So they do say some good things, but then they're HHS. And HHS just puts SUD onto the working group. They'll do one thing in one group, and then they'll say, do something else in another group. And then they're working with these people that are in the other group, and it's it's all corrupted crap. And there might be some good people trying to do some good stuff, but everything that comes out of there is controlled by the feds, or it's going to be manipulated by the feds, or it's going to be used by the feds. So one thing that's in these comments that really bugs me, that it's duh, is that those two things recommend certain things happen for Lyme medicine and Lyme patients, but they put those things in the hands and the control of the feds. So one of the LymeX recommendations was, okay, we'll do this, create this thing, and we'll be the ones that tell patients what doctors they should go to. We'll know who all the doctors are, and we'll tell the patients which doctors they should go to. And hell no, I don't want HHS involved. No. Corrupt assholes for 40 years controlling everything, and you want them to control these new things that actually might sound good till you just said HHS was going to control it. No. So, or putting them in control of education efforts when they just said they can't educate people because it'll confuse them. We lied to them for 40 years. We can't educate them, it'll confuse them. So that's a big hang up of mine, is these things that are supposed to be good are just putting control back in with the feds. And that's one thing I was going to say was going to make one person not like it. So their reason for saying, or their explanation of this whole statement about LymeX was created to control the private and federal research dollars. They didn't mean control, they meant harness. To harness something is to control it. Put a harness on a dog. Why do you do that? To control it. I'm impaired, but I'm not that impaired. And they said that the reason that they use disrupted without capacity is because they didn't want to use labels. They didn't want to use the disabled label. Okay, I know certain people feel very strongly about saying they're disabled, but you don't have to go like with t-shirt, I'm disabled, but you need to be able to document you're disabled to a federal agency that can give you disability before you can get disability. And so they avoided using the label to be politically correct or something. I'm not going to go there. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But that's what they were saying that they were doing, is to avoid labels. And in doing so, they screwed millions out of being able to get disability. They didn't go fix the disability process, so you didn't have to have a label. But that's how it works right now, is you have to have the label to get it. So that was a whole story. So, okay, 2 more subjects. Another thing, one of the topics of these is all these tests. So all these studies. So the problem with studies, and it will continue to be a problem, is that all these studies require CDC positives for the participants. So they have never studied people with long Lyme unless they happen to still test positive. I know there's a few out there, but so if you have to have a CDC positive to get into a study, and all the participants have to have the CDC positive for that study, a study has never studied the people that actually got so sick that they no longer test positive, which is us, most of us. We still love you if you test positive. So I don't think anybody's going to listen to this part in here. Send me a smiley face if you do. So all these studies that they cite, and they like to say one thing or another, that's the giant flaw. So another comment, I'm going to slip another one in here on you, is about this Kempler or something like that, but there's like 2 or 3 of them, where, and NIH pulled this out this time. Oh, I didn't tell you about the subcommittee. Write that down, because I don't ever want to have to do all this again. So, I lost it. Oh, the bad studies. So the NIH likes to cite these, even though in 2020, really awesome advocates, smarter than all these other guys, said, okay, those studies were crap. I told those guys those studies were going to be crap before they did them, and they did them anyway. And anyone who is this much of a scientist knows their studies are crap. So they did the studies anyway. And those are the studies that they cite to say long-term antibiotics don't help long Lyme patients. Okay, their study was 1 antibiotic. One at a time, or 1 the whole time. And that whole time was like 2 months. Maybe it was like a little longer, but I think it was 2 months. And so 1 antibiotic for 2 months. And that's how they're saying long-term antibiotics don't help Lyme patients. Now they're sticking on it even hurts them. Because everyone knows long-term antibiotics hurt people. So that's not part of the study that it hurts them. They just tag that on now. And so, because it was only 2 months, it's not going to hurt you that bad. Like, get some probiotics, dude. So that's the new thing. That's the new thing to be saying. And then they all were like 1 antibiotic for a couple of months. And they're saying that they proved that antibiotics don't work. And then the other part of that is, at least one of those studies, Carl Tuttle wrote all about this. I believe that was him. They used a measurement of if someone is better or not better. And maybe it was for a different study with a kind of a twisted thing that still screwed us. If they were better or not better was based on this analysis that nobody uses. Like, you don't do it that way. Like, maybe it was they got better. It's saying that they got better after 2 weeks. And their better was that they said they were a 9.5 that day instead of a 10, on pain or something, I don't know. So it was like nobody used the measurements that they use, like you don't do it that way, but they did it that way to say, oh, they just need 2 weeks, antibiotics, they got better. It was something like that. And so these are known flaws, it's documented, it's been published how they're flawed they are, but they keep citing them like those people haven't told them they're flawed. I mean, Sam Donta was the working group member that explained how bad they sucked and that he told them they were going to suck before they did them, and they did them anyway. Sat there in the same room with them, maybe it was online, sat them in the same meeting with them and told them to their face, and they're still going around citing these studies like they're legit. So that's one issue. Since we're on the test one, I think I only have 2 subjects left. So the test one. So you might have, this is back to LymeX. So LymeX has this diagnostics challenge, and they're gonna like give some people some money for creating a new test. I don't know if it's enough money to do them a lot of good. I don't know how much it takes to create a test, but it certainly helped it, right? So, but, giant but, huge but, they have to validate these tests. They have to be approved. And even, so they finally put out some measurements of what's going to make this one be a good guy and this one, he didn't do so good, that kind of stuff. And the word validate's in there. Or, yeah, I think it's validate. So to validate a new test, the FDA has to do that. But even to validate who's the winner and who's not the winner, you have to measure it against something. It can't be like, well, that one makes me think of puppies, so I like that one better. Like, you have to have some way to measure it. And so you're going to measure it in 2 ways. A crappy CDC test, which is an acute only, week 4 to 6, 71% false negative test, or there's something called the Lyme serum. So they came up with this Lyme serum back when they did all this crap to screw us over in 1993. So this Lyme serum is from people who also don't get that sick. I mean, they probably had to be CDC positive to be labeled, this Lyme serum is from a positive person. And they were CDC negative, this Lyme serum is from a negative person. And then there's also this one, I don't know how they come up with this one. We don't believe this person, so they are a false positive. So they've got serum that they've decided is positive, serum they decided is negative, and serum they decided is false positive. And there's probably a false negative, I don't know. Yeah, there's probably a false negative. That person, they say they're safe, but they're not really. And they tested positive, but not really. So we're going to call that, that'd be a false positive. I forgot where I was thinking for a false negative, but you can come up with one and probably tell it funnier than I can. So they've labeled this serum those things. And so when these new tests come about, they're going to have to validate them. They're going to say, I like that guy. Not only does he make me think of puppies, but he tested just like our CDC test, or he was right with all these serums. But those 2 things suck big booty. The CDC test doesn't work. It's all kinds of false negatives. And I hope I didn't just mess up that whole false positive word. You know what I meant, right? Or I'm probably just talking to myself at this point. Nobody's listening this far. And then the Lyme serum is crap too. So this whole notion of this diagnostic challenge stuff is fishy to me, especially given LymeX is HHS and they're like pretending this neutral third thing when it's not. Like, they've already screwed us over on the label thing, trying to be politically correct or do what the agency would have them do, or whatever you would say it in a way not to make anybody mad at me. And so, except LymeX. Not personal. The 40 years that the guys did those guys, oh yeah, that might be personal. But I forgot what I was doing because I got worried I would just hurt someone's feelings. I don't know. So it's fishy, right? The LymeX challenge is fishy. What's even fishier is I keep bringing it up. So after I met with the subcontractors I started tweeting that they were subcontractors, that I didn't understand what LymeX actually was. Looks like HHS to me, but what is it? I met with the head of the whole crud for HHS, and I forgot why I was telling you that. Oh, and I brought up, how are the tests going to be validated? And they're like, well, that's a really good point. We're going to have to figure that out. But everyone is ignoring me, and everybody who's retweeting me, because these guys are on Twitter. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that word right now, and we're just going to pretend like I didn't say that. That'll be for another day. And but that's how I've gotten this attention. And so they acknowledge that's a thing, but for a year and a half, they've ignored that thing is actually a thing, and they're just talking about the diagnostic challenge and trying to get all these people to submit their new test that they're just going to screw over and say it doesn't work when it does work, because if it works, it will have too many false positives. And they're going to say it's too many false positives, it didn't work, and that person's test is destroyed forever. I thought of another subject, but it's not in my comments. Oh, I can loop it around. So the corruption of the Lyme disease, tick-borne disease working group. Okay, tick-borne disease working group. The corruption of that, the manipulation of that. So one of the doozies that they did this year on top of the regular doozies with the votes, they put Sud, so the troll, the guy who's been, he supports all this stuff. So Sud has published and told people, like in interviews, told the public, it takes 42 to 78 hours of tick attachment to get infected. And don't bother testing the tick. Just, you might keep it so we can tell you what kind of tick it was. Because it probably doesn't even have Lyme disease. That tick doesn't even have Lyme disease. But you don't want to send it off for testing. To just like see what it actually had. And he plays down Lyme. Like a lot of people freak out about Lyme, but it's fine. Don't worry about it. And like he even said this crud with Neil Spector in the same interview with him. And so a bunch of stuff like that. So they took that guy Sud, put him on the working group because he's going to vote like they want him to vote. And then on top of that, they put him as a co-chair for the Lyme treatment subcommittee, with the NIH being the other co-chair. So the NIH and this troll are the co-chairs for the Lyme treatment subcommittee. Are you kidding me? That's like the worst thing that could happen. It could have been the CDC guy instead of the NIH. But it's like the NIH is taking the lead this year. Like last working group, the CDC guy came in, he'd get all the recommendations changed to where the CDC were comfortable with them. So they're all nice for the CDC. They didn't actually tell the truth. And then he steps back, and then the co-chair, so he was a non-federal member, which was he was a troll in my opinion. His title involves something that sounds like bioweapons, but I don't remember what that word was. Like Texas University and some word like bioweapons in his title. The subtitle is that. That guy was the co-chair, and then Shapiro came in, swooped in, and then they attacked all the chapter content. So they dissected the chapter content and got all the chapter content removed, and then because the CDC guy had already removed all the recommendation stuff they didn't like. So that's how they tag teamed. So this year, or this working group, it's a 2-year thing, CDC guy seems to have stepped back, and it's the NIH guy. He's working with Sud, and he's going to be doing the bad stuff. So, and he said some bullcrap already. And I don't know where I was going with that. That's how that works. Oh, so that's one of the worst things. So he's over the Lyme treatment subcommittee, one of the worst things. And so you're like, well, why is that so bad? So how the working group works is, the point of the working group is to write a report to Congress. So I've done this video a couple of times now. Like I live streamed it and it didn't work so nobody could hear me. It's really messed me up because now I feel like I've said everything and I probably haven't said everything. Or I'm repeating myself now when I have said that in this one. So sorry about that. So I just lost my train of thought. Okay, so there's a whole working group, 14 people. Then they have subcommittees. So Lyme treatment subcommittee, written comments subcommittee, physiology subcommittee, I don't know, some sciencey subcommittees. Oh, alpha-gal subcommittee. So there's other tick-borne infections. They can have their subcommittees too. And so one of them is Lyme treatment. It was treatment. So Lyme treatment is in there. And to me, I'm calling that the Lyme treatment because that's what I'm talking about. And we're the more people, so we get to help everybody, whether it's Lyme or not. Because we have all those other things too. So they break into the subcommittees, and then that subcommittee goes, I did talk about this today. They go and they write the recommendations. And then they come back, they whittle away at the recommendations till everybody's happy with them. And then, oh, I gotta talk about that. Minority Report. And then they go back to their subcommittees, and then they write this, their chapter, or their subcommittee report. And then they go in and they talk about that some. And then what ends up happening is the chapter in the final report to Congress about that one thing, the subcommittee thing, comes out of the subcommittee report. So there's not extra things. They started talking about this and I got excited, but then the NIH guy kind of pulled them back. Like, you can't add stuff, it just has to be in our chapter. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but usually you don't add, only what's in the subcommittee report can go ever into the chapters. So the non-federal advocates out there, they can't start adding stuff in because it's true and it deals with that subcommittee. It has to come out of the subcommittee chapter or report. So that's why it's so bad. Oh, and on top of that, so the NIH and SUD guy, all the other subcommittees, they invited experts on their topic to come and talk to them. The NIH and SUD guy, they invited experts to be their subcommittee. So the other subcommittees, they had their experts as subcommittee members, but then they asked other people to come and talk to them. So SUD and NIH, they were much more tight-knit. They invited all these experts, and that was their experts. And those experts were like Paul Mead and some other guys, I don't remember their names, but they're part of the 40 Years of Crap people. So Paul Mead, he is a chief at the CDC. He's still a chief at the CDC, despite what someone at HHS tried to tell me that he wasn't. He is. Found the website right then and there. He wouldn't be involved in this. Well, his name was on this 2007 email from the ALDF, so that's American Lyme Disease Foundation. So the American Lyme Disease Foundation was part of this 1993 crap, the testing change. ALDF did not exist until right before this vaccine stuff went down. And the word is, don't know if I can prove it, the word is that the vaccine makers started ALDF. And if you go look at what they say about long Lyme, it sure does look like it's a bunch of crap. So this 2007 email from the ALDF, it says, okay, it's to all these people. To these people, like Shapiro and all the names that you would know after you've looked at all this stuff for a while. The 40-year people, the 1993 people, they're on this. And so is Paul Mead of the CDC, and I believe her name is Barbara Johnson. She's kind of like this Lyme test person. Like, that Lyme test is bad. We can't let that one in. And she actually, I think her name might be as a patent holder of the CDC Lyme test. CDC Lyme test, the patent holders are CDC employees or work. And so, I lost my train of thought. Oh, the email. So the email that has Paul Mead's name on it says, okay guys, since the science is not on our side, we are anti-long Lyme. We want to say long Lyme doesn't exist. Lyme doesn't persist and people aren't sick long-term for long Lyme. That's our whole stance because of that 1993 stuff where we reversed the science and made it so people don't know about this for 40 years. Our stance has to be long Lyme doesn't exist, and we're going to stick to that. So the science is not supporting that. So we have to wage a socio-political assault, and that would be on Lyme patients and Lyme doctors. So ALDF president guy, Fish, I think it's Fish, I don't know. So he's the ALDF president at one time. He wrote that email and sent it to a bunch of people, and Paul Mead from the CDC was on it. Paul Mead was invited to be on this subcommittee by NIH and SUD. So just like they put trolls onto the working group, they put trolls onto the subcommittee. And we're not supposed to know that. We're not supposed to be able to say anything about it because they know they've got us silenced because we can't do anything because we're too sick. So that's why we wrote this. That's why a bunch of us have to send it in, because no, we are not too sick. We can do this, and I will keep trying until we figure out a way to get this done and get other things done. And just keep disclosing, because, okay, right now, people are very fed up with federal health agencies. They have figured out federal health agencies work on behalf of big pharma. So why is all this Lyme stuff still manipulated 40 years later? Well, if all these people aren't diagnosed for Lyme disease and it causes 300 other illnesses and mental illness and all this stuff, big pharma is making a buttload off of us. So all these illnesses are caused by Lyme and nobody knows that. Then big pharma keeps making all this money because the cause of all this illness is never treated. So big pharma making a ton of money. And so people are figuring that out about big pharma. They don't know about Lyme specifically, but they're figuring that out about big pharma, and they're figuring out all these people with long COVID, okay, they are sick. This isn't in their head. There's too many of them, and too many people personally know someone who wouldn't be faking it. And they're getting gaslighted. What is all this? And, just the whole 2 years have people suspecting, what is up with all this crap? This does not smell right. So people are out there looking for the truth. And we're going to bring it to them. And this is one of our projects. And this one really, really, really matters. If we could get a new working group that doesn't have 7 federal members choosing 7 non-federal members, and we can actually get truth published, that would be awesome. If we could end this whole thing where the federal agencies are getting recommendations to control all this stuff. It's recommended that the feds keep controlling this stuff, and the feds start doing these good things now. Those good things are not going to be good anymore. Duh. So, please, 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 send these in. And if you can't, say, can you please send me these? Can you please send these in for me? Or you can say, can you please send me, because I can't do your Dropbox or Google stuff, and it's just not working, but I have email, and I have something that would open these documents, and I want to read them, but I'm confused. So can you send them to me? And I'll send them to you. But also you can say, okay, this is my name, this is my city and state, please send them in for me. And this is my email address, so you can CC me, so they know I'm a real person, and I will send them in for you. And I will be so happy to do that. They're starting to come in, so that I'm sending them in for people. And I ask HHS, the person who is the poor person who's going to get all these, if that was a thing we could do, send them on behalf of people, because that's a new comment I'm going to be writing, is people are too sick to do this process. They're supposed to let us get public comments in, but they've not made it so this is possible for a bunch of people that are very, very sick and cannot follow steps. Grabbing the email address, grabbing the subject, all this stuff. It's when you can't process, you can't do steps. So that's another comment. So I will send them in. I will be ecstatic to do that. And if we could get that analysis to spit out 100 people said this, 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 and this, that will be huge, especially when they've only gotten 100 comments ever. So we need a new working group, and we need to call them out on this BS. 40 years is 40 years too many. And our friends are not doing so well, and they need us to do this for them. And if you're someone who's not doing well and I can do this for you, and you can just let me know to do it for you, I would be happy, 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 happy to do that for you. So, oh, did I say this? See, I don't remember if I said this now. To do this, if you ever need to do this, is that backwards? Yeah, so you have to do it backwards or people can't read them. So just a tip. I'm going to put that, I think, as the little thumbnail. Is that what it's called? So I'm figuring all this stuff out. But we will get it all figured out. And then we'll kick some booty. Thank you for listening to all this, if anyone did. And I'm going to log off now. Love you guys. Thank you. The manipulation of Lyme medicine must be brought to an end. Lyme medicine will never be allowed to progress. Honest research will never be funded. True statistics and real and effective treatments won't be obtained, and lives will keep being destroyed. The public and medical community will never be told the truth about Lyme, causing Lyme patients to be treated horridly by doctors and to not be believed by friends and family and the public, until the corruption and manipulation stop. The tactics the federal and big pharma collusion use must be known by patients and then the public. Using their tactics, they keep us silenced with false hope, waiting and hoping things will change, while the controlled efforts like the working group and LymeX keep working with and funding the same corrupt guys and using the false statistics those guys came up with as they tell Congress and the public they recommend new Lyme efforts be placed in the control of the very agencies and individuals that have corrupted Lyme medicine for 40 years. The non-federal working group members must not fall for the federal tactic. To get things done, we have to build bridges. When doing so will result in Lyme truth not being disclosed, and in their false Lyme statistics and information being perpetuated, and the driving forces that forever push out the day Lyme medicine is finally allowed to progress. The non-federal working group members must disclose truth and call out the lies, misinformation, and corruption. They must vote for complete and full truth and against weasel wording or outright lies that give credence to a false controversy or the science of long Lyme still being disputed, so research can't be funded and treatments found. The non-federal working group members must vote against the majority. They must write minority reports so that the truth, the full truth, about Lyme disease and Lyme medicine's corruption is known. And once that corruption is known, it will no longer be able to keep Lyme medicine from evolving for another 40 years. That is why we must submit these comments together as a group that has power. We have to document the truths and the manipulations and tell the non-federal working group members to disclose those and to call for the formation of a new working group, one that is not in the control of the agencies and individuals instrumental in supporting the 40 years of manipulation. Here are the new comment instructions. Things just got a whole lot more simple. We were told yesterday morning that we have to get comments in by next Tuesday, the 11th. So let's just think we have to get these in by the 10th. And so this is how to do that. We no longer have a 4-page maximum because these comments are not attached to a meeting. I don't understand that whole logic of 4-page max and attaching to a meeting when it didn't really ever matter it was attached to a meeting. So start over, new comment instructions, no maximums. So I've combined all the comments into one long document that will have every comment that we'd ever want, and that says, or it's formatted so that their big data analysis tool will pull out the themes that we want, and everything will stay as it is combined in that comment. It will be self-supporting. It doesn't need information from other comments. Each comment is standalone, and it says everything we want it to. So these are the instructions for sending those in. First, download the one full document of comments. So that's one document. It's on Google Docs and it's on Dropbox. There's instructions also in those. So there's just one file that you need, and there's instructions if you need it. Besides these right here, you could just screen grab these or pause it right here. And you download the one file. If you like Google Docs, you can go to Google Docs. If you like Dropbox, you can go to Dropbox. They're the same exact things. You open an email. You open new message. So you have a new message sitting in front of you. You add in the to line, tick-borne disease at hhs.gov. Then you go to the subject line. You add to the subject line, public written comments. Now you add to the email body, this is important, refer to me as your name, or you can be anonymous if you don't want your name attached, city and state, your city and state. That's all you need in the email body. And now you attach the one file, and then you hit send. Now there is no page maximum, so you can add your own statement to these. I would add it the very first thing, so they see there is a part of this that's different than all the others. This is a person's personal story or a personal statement. I would do that at the beginning. You can put it wherever you want, wherever it's easy. And now I'll say, if you have any trouble with any of this, you want me to send them on behalf of you, they've given me permission to send those in. I CC you, and then you can say, yes, these are my comments. So we can do that if this is complicated for people, which I understand. And if you want your own personal statement in it, but you still don't know how to send it, you're not comfortable with that, you can't follow these steps, you can send me your personal statement. You can write it up in a private message, an email, whatever you want that gets it, so I can grab it and put it in yours. I'm happy, more than happy to do that too. So I'll send these in any way you want. Send in, or just send in yours, and you don't have to do the full document, but we really need the full document. We don't want all these comments to just go in and bombard them, because they're already pulling the crap. The feds are pulling the crap that they always pull. And I'll go over that real quick at the end of this. So that's how we do this. Those are our instructions. It got really simple, and we have to do that by October 10th. Okay. If you need any help at all, please message me. I'm very findable. Thank you. So we just saw in the last 2 days why it's really important for us to submit these public comments. Yesterday and today, there were working group meetings, and I gave my oral comments to pave the way for our written comments. I only had 3 minutes. You can't say anything in 3 minutes, and I think that is by design. You don't have time to say much of anything and say why you're saying this and put it out there, the truth about the whole corruption of Lyme medicine. So I talked about the non-federal members should not fall for this pressure about building bridges, and in the spirit of building bridges, they have to cave and change their recommendations to things that are not truthful and honest, and tell the truth and say what it is we actually really need to happen. So I talked about that for my little 3 minutes. And then Kristen Honey, who's the person that works for HHS that's in charge of all this Lyme stuff, she's in charge of Lyme X, she talked about my comment. So first when she started talking, I was like, oh crap, I'm gonna get reamed here, and I don't even get a chance to say anything back. So she said I had a very good point of, if you fall for this building bridges stuff, what are these bridges being built to? Where's it going? It's going nowhere. It's 40 more years of manipulation. She didn't say all the stuff that I said. She just said that I had a very good point about what are we building bridges to, and then she paved the way for the typical like federal agency stuff about how things are going to change and all this stuff. So so that happened first, and now today we finally saw how this works out for us in action. So the feds, they control the vote. They put their troll in. The working group is already 7-7, which doesn't like other working groups. So they put their troll in, so it's at the most, or at least, whichever you would say that, 8 of their votes to 6 of our votes. And so our non-federal members, our advocates, they want to make a recommendation like, okay, HHS has to review all the clinical studies for persistent Lyme disease and see what these things actually said. See what they were really should have concluded instead of like what was concluded because the feds and big pharma pay for the funding for the same old guys doing the same old studies that require CDC positives, and they come up with conclusions that are crap. And her recommendation was, okay, we need to relook at these and see what these studies actually showed. And then whatever the truth of that is needs to go into education. So they had just passed or failed, whatever. They had just had a vote, and it turned out that they're not going to suggest that there is a new FACA federal agency or federal committee, another working group. They decided against that. The feds have the vote, and they decided against. There's not going to be another working group. And so they knew that this new recommendation was also not going to pass, and they were not going to accept that non-federal people should have a role in looking through all the new clinical or all the old clinical studies and seeing what actually these things are, what actually they said, what they actually should have said. They don't want us to have a role in that. And since they're not going to let that through and they control the vote, the non-federal members have to change the recommendation. And we don't want them to change the recommendation. We want them to leave it as it is, and if it doesn't go through and they vote against the federal majority, they get to write a minority report and tell the truth and expose. This whole working group's been crap from the start. They've manipulated it from the start, and we've documented that for the world to see. We put it on paper for Congress to see. It is now out there, written down, what the feds have done. They've manipulated this working group. These are not honest recommendations. These are tweaked recommendations for what the agencies can live with, and it's all a bunch of bullshit. So that's what we need to happen, minority reports. So the non-federal members just saw this happen to them. Now they're still thinking, okay, well, to get anything, we got to tweak this recommendation. No. Okay, tweak one, but write a new one, have it fail, then write a minority report. You have to write a minority report. You have to get this stuff documented. And so that's what all our comments, well, that's what a lot of our comments are about. They're all about, we have to get the truth out there. So we really have to get these in so the non-federal members see we have their backs. They really have to do this. They can't be caving for this building bridges crap and, singing Kumbaya, and the same old people, the same exact people are running Lyme medicine that have been running Lyme medicine for 40 years. The exact same dudes. They got to be like 100 years old. And then they have their little offspring dudes that have been supporting them for the last, 20 years or whatever. But same guys. Got to get rid of them. Got to get rid of them. Got to write minority reports. Got to insist that the old players have to be removed from the scene, because they're all about the trust gap, because they know the public is starting to see that federal agencies work for big pharma, and they're starting to get a little nervous. So it's our time. Our time is now. We got to do this, and it's a perfect time to do this. And you guys are awesome. I've seen how many people have watched this video already, and now I'm tweaking it and putting it out again. But we got to start sharing it all over the place. Like, we've already got like 100 views on the other video. Hopefully 100 people are actually sending these documents in. So if you've listened to this whole thing, go rest your brain, and you're awesome. Thank you. Love you guys. We're going to do this. Bye-bye.